Let's call this meeting to order. Please join me in the flag salute. The flag of the United States of America and the republic and one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first up, work session for budget 101, just kind of an explanation of the budget process for all of the budget committee members.
So I'd like to introduce Jackie Olson. She's here to do the budget 101 presentation this year. She's from OASBO, which is Oregon Association of School Business Officials. Perfect, thank you. And hopefully we can all learn something new and hear somebody other than me talk about budgets. And she can answer questions. You put it further at the end, or did you go?
Ask questions as we go. I'm here for you guys, and so whatever you need, if you interrupt me at any time. Okay, Jesse and I are working on it. We're gonna see if I can share my screen here. Okay. All right, so I am Jackie Olson. I'm the executive director for OASBO. I love budgets. Before I was at OASBO, I spent about 12 years in school districts and ESDs. While I was at the ESD, I did not only the ESD's budget, but I also did school districts budgets on top of that. So on average, I did probably 3 budgets a year. It's one of my favorite things, and I just think it's super fun to talk about. So hopefully you're going to love budgets too by the time we are done with this. So we're really here today to talk about the budget committee's role and what the difference between the budget committee and the board is. Are we good on? So today's outcomes, we're going to understand what a budget is, understanding the role of the budget committee, a little bit about the account codes, because you get a document with a whole bunch of numbers in it, and I always think it's important to know what the heck those numbers mean, and understanding what the budget process is. So what is a budget? I think this is the most important question that I get asked. And it's a plan. It's a report showing the district's comprehensive financial plan for one fiscal year. That provides an estimate for the current and upcoming budget periods. And the budget is the basis for the appropriations, which creates the budget authority. So many of us in this role as school finance officers are type A personalities, and we always want everything to balance. We want to make sure we're right and all the numbers line up. And as soon as we provide you a printed budget document, it's wrong because it's an estimate and it's a plan based on the information we have at that point in time. And usually by the time I got to printing my document, it was already, I'm like, I could go and change a whole bunch of numbers. And so there's never a time to do it. And so the budget committee, I think it's really important to understand that you are approving an authority. You're not approving all these exact amounts because most of them are incorrect. So we follow Oregon Department of Revenue's local budget law. They have a manual out there. So this is not just a school district thing. This is all local governments. And there's a process for us. There is this manual out on their website and you can go read it. It is riveting. It has all sorts of fun information in it. And I learn something new every time I read it. But this is how we base what we do for our budget process. It's not made up and everybody has to do the same things. Okay, so the purpose of the local budget law. So I didn't have my notes, so Jesse's sharing his computer because I can't do it both on here. So it really is it establishes some standard procedure. So everybody uses the exact same format when we're preparing our budgets, when we're presenting information. It encourages citizen involvement, which I think is why we're here today with the budget committee. We really want everybody creates that process. It doesn't just happen in a vacuum. We can't just create it in our office and say, we're right, we did it, and this is how we're going. It really does include the public. We outline programs and fiscal policies. Require estimates of resources and expenditures. And again, even this is out of the local budget law manual. And it uses, again, those words of require estimates because everything is an estimate. And it's a way for us to control expenditure of public funds. So we don't just create things and get to run away with public funds. We create a plan of how we're going to use those. And then we adjust throughout the year, and we're always accountable for what we come back to as public funds. And on the idea of public funds, I want to say that public funds are every single dollar that enters this district. It doesn't matter if it is a dollar raised for a basketball team through a fundraising activity, a dollar received from the state school fund, or a dollar received from the federal government. You as a budget committee are just as responsible for allocating and looking at all of those revenue and expenditures because the board is responsible for that. So the role of the budget committee. So we have a budget committee that consists of an equal number of board members, which are all of you, and community members. Even though we have a couple of missing people, it still takes everybody on here, and that's how it balances that out. It is outlined in ORS, and the work of the budget committee upholds that requirement. Committee reviews, revises if necessary, and then approves the budget. So as a whole, the board cannot approve the budget independently without the budget committee, because all of you together have to make up what that quorum is. So even having 50% of just board members, you still need one more. You have to have at least a community member here and voting with you. And the committee approves the maximum expenditures for each fund. So it doesn't say that you approve line item by line item. It says you approve a maximum expenditure and you approve the taxes to be imposed. Are there any questions here before, or anything else before I go on?
What happens if we don't?
Well, then if you don't approve, the board can't adopt, and basically the school cannot operate. So you cannot spend any money until July 1. Are starting on July 1. And so if you have no adopted budget, not one person is showing up in here. You can't turn on the lights because you can't pay for the electricity. You have no authority to spend that money. So it's a critical step in getting that budget adopted. Other questions? All right, so in order to do all this, you have to know a little bit about what you're looking at, right? Oh, nope, I went to a different thing. So we're gonna look at, sorry, now my notes are off on yours. I'm just gonna make it up as I go. That's how I'm rolling tonight. So your budget committee responsibilities. So you hear and receive the budget message. This is often provided by either your business director or your superintendent. You receive a copy of the proposed budget document. You review and discuss the proposed budget document, and this is done in a number of different ways. I do not think that it is a great use of time, nor is it necessary to go through every single page and look at every single line item. I really like to say what has changed, what are the board's goals, and how do we work our way through the budget that way. You get to listen and accept public input. And I think it's important to say you listen and you accept. It doesn't mean you react and you change. It's just like at your board meeting, you get to hear public comment. We don't necessarily always get to respond, or we don't make changes based on that. And then you approve the budget once the full review is completed and the budget committee is comfortable with where you're at. So during a budget committee meeting, you're going to elect officers. Is this the first time anybody, is this your first year on the budget committee, or you've all right?
No, this one.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. We got a couple of, by going too fast, or you guys think I need to go into more detail or anything, you let me know. I'm happy to talk about this. So you're going to elect the officers. You're going to have a budget committee chair, which may be a member of the board, or it may be a member of the community. There is no rules on that. The superintendent or the budget officer will present the budget message. The budget committee gets to ask questions. I think that's a number one part of your job. You get to ask those questions. You get to request information for clarification and you receive input from citizens, then you approve. And you establish a property tax rate for all funds. And I say this, I keep saying the property tax rate. You don't get to pick the rate, but you still have to approve it. And it's a really important part of local budget law because you can't collect property taxes unless you do this piece. And if you don't collect property taxes, you're missing out on a big chunk of your state school fund dollars. Because your property taxes and the money coming from the state together make up what your total of your general fund is. And if you didn't do this and you didn't collect property taxes, all the other districts across the state basically have to backfill that money for you. And that makes it really bad. You don't want to be on the header above the paper. You don't want to be on the front page of the paper for that, right? So these are some of those steps and why they go through, but that is the process. If you don't approve the property tax rate and then the board adopts it later on, and then those papers are filed with the county. So that's how that process works in order for you to collect property taxes. All right, so what do the numbers mean? They are really fun. I love the chart of accounts. It's developed by Oregon Department of Education. We meet as a committee at least once a year. We review the manual. We see if there's updates or changes that need to be made to the program budgeting and accounting manual. And it's available to anybody. It's out there on ODE's website. You can click on it. You can read it. You can learn all sorts of numbers and how we code things and why. But the goal is that we across the state all use the same type of account codes. So that when I code a licensed staff at an elementary school, I'm using 100 for my general fund. I'm using 1111 for the elementary function, and I use 0111 for their salary. Well, I'm going to do that. Celia's going to do that. Junction City's going to do that. Eugene's going to do that. All of our neighbors across the state are going to use that exact same code, which helps us start creating some ways to report to ODE. ODE uses that data to report to the federal government. And it all comes back in around and we just keep reviewing. So I like to think of a chart of accounts as a roadmap. It is 20 digits long. And I could tell you a lot of account codes and I learned and memorized numbers, and I'm sure that you can rattle off quite a few as well. But it really starts getting into where if I tell you it's the general fund, that could really be anywhere in the district, right? And then you tell us what function. So we start narrowing it down. And really by the time we get down to it, I could tell you basically which classroom we're looking at in which school. And that's the point of the entire account code. We aren't going to focus on all 20 digits today because that is way more information than you need. But that's the information that we're required to use when we code expenditures or revenue. So when you look at the account code structure, we have fund, function, object, cost center, area, and sub area are all the different categories. And we're really going to focus on the first three today because that's what you're going to need to know to really understand your budget. If you want to get into more details later on, I'm sure Celia would give it to you. I really don't want you to do that just to fall asleep. That really is interesting. So a fund is a group of accounts which are used to record and control the district's general fixed assets and unmatured general long-term liabilities. That is the definition right out of the PBIS. I think a fund is your general fund is is a lot of your main operating, and then you have other things, and those other things are really what is specified in other accounts. If you don't think it's specified in something else, it's really the general fund. So we have general fund, special revenue funds. Special revenue funds are grants. Anybody think of a grant that you have that would fall into the special revenue fund category?
So like our high school success, our SIA,
Title I.
Title I, we get the early learning money, preschool promise, those are all in the 200s.
Debt service, I'll give you one guess on what the debt service funds are for. Debt service, right? You're going to take out a large loan, it's going to be reported here. Capital projects are really large things that you may do, projects around the district office or the district. you might have, haven't looked at your budget, so I'm giving examples, I'm not 100% sure, but accounts set up that you might be saving money for projects that are upcoming, so that if you ever need to put a new roof on something, you may have a capital projects funds that you've been saving money for that.
So is a bond 300 for?
The bond payment and the debt service is in 300, the money when you deposit it, all the expenditures come out of the 400 fund. Great question. Other funds that are not as common to see are the 500, 600, and 700 funds, and I'm not going to go into detail about those because they're a lot less common. So the next chunk of the account code are the functions, and the function describes an activity for which the service or material object is required. The major functions of the district are classified into 7 different areas. And this is really important because this is where your budget appropriations exist. So this is the level that you approve how much the district can spend. And so I'd like to spend just a little bit of time on here. So instruction is instruction. Elementary, middle, high school, it's the actual work that happens in a classroom. Support services. You're an example of support services. You are a line item in the budget, the board, the budget committee, the superintendent, the business office, everything that it takes to support the sport students in the classroom are support services. Enterprise and community services, the most common thing I see budgeted in a 3,000 function is your food service. It's not required for instruction. It is a community service and that we are providing food to students. Facility acquisition and construction. This happens when you have construction, large facility purchases. That's where those go. And then you get into some of the other categories of the 5,000 are transfers of funds and debt service. And then you have contingency and unappropriated. Can anybody tell me the difference? Does anybody know the difference between contingency and unappropriated? Because there's a lot of times when people use those together. So contingency is the amount of reserves that I have budgeted that in an emergency, the board can reappropriate. So it's appropriated in a category called contingency, because we can't just have a side account for our savings. You have your own checking account, you have a savings account, you kind of put that to the side, but all of our money is budgeted into one area, and we have to appropriate every dollar that we want to spend. So if we think that we're going to have the savings, but in an emergency, we want to be able to spend it, that's where I'm going to budget the money in contingency. The amount that gets budgeted in contingency is varied between any district. I recommend a minimum of 5 to 8%. GFOA, in order to go out, if you were to go out for a bond, they're looking to get the best rating. They want to see a 15% contingency, and that gets way high. And so there's a big difference between that. We also have districts that are clear down to 1 or 2%. So that varies. Unappropriated ending fund balance is unappropriated. And if you don't appropriate a dollar, you can't spend that dollar. You only get to spend funds that are appropriated. So if you put it in a category of unappropriated, that means that this is what I'm going to save for the following year, and it doesn't matter what happens. This district could go through a flood, it could burn every building down, and you could add other things on it, and you still cannot touch that money. It is unappropriated because you have to appropriate it before July 1. So that's the board and budget committee's authority there.
And you can't amend the budget for that?
You cannot for unappropriated. You can for the other categories. All right.
I mean, a question, isn't it also good practice to have an ending fund balance though?
Yes, an ending fund balance is really important. And that could be only in contingency, or it could be a combination of the two. I think it really depends on the size of the district and what your overall ending fund balance has continued to roll forward as.
Because it becomes the beginning.
Fund balance for the big, yeah.
I'm sorry, that left me more confused. Are you referring to an unappropriated ending fund balance?
Well, yeah. that-
Or just an ending fund balance that is a contingency?
My
Which way did you mean?
So when I use ending fund balance, I say at the end, at June 30, when all of our revenue comes in and all of our expenditures go out, this is what I have left, and this rolls forward as is my ending fund balance and rolls forward to my beginning fund
Is that
balance.
a 7,000 or a 6,000?
That is everything that I didn't spend. It will include your unappropriated, it will include your contingency and everything else that the district didn't spend. And that becomes your beginning fund balance, and the next year you get to reappropriate and you can throw the dice up in the air and mix it all up again. So you never have to do the same in your contingency or unappropriated, and unless you have a really healthy reserve, unappropriated is not necessarily where I always want to put money. I prefer it to be in contingency if it's a smaller district. All right, so the next important part of your account code structure is objects. So the object is the service or commodity bought. And these are also divided into sub-objects for more detailed accounting, and there are 8 different categories. This is where we start getting into some of the details. So anything that starts with a 1 is salary. And it could be anybody's salary. It doesn't matter if it's a substitute, a coach, a principal, a teacher. Everybody's has a different code within salaries, but that's what they all start with a 1. So we always know if they start with a 1 that they are an actual payment to a person. The 200 are associated payroll costs. So that's your health insurance. It's PERS, it's unemployment, it's taxes, it's everything else that for the employee as part of the payroll process is a 200 code. Purchase services. I always get questions on this because purchase services sounds like that could be a whole lot of things. The biggest thing in here is your utilities. So this is where all of your power, your water, your fuel, then on top of it, do you guys have your own busing?
Yes.
So if people were to contract out for a service, a purchase service could be if you don't run your own transportation and you hired a company, that's where it would be in purchase services. Supplies and materials are just that, supplies. And it is, if I look at the difference between a supply and material versus a capital outlay, there's a threshold that they use in there of $5,000. Or you could also say, I like to say, is your supply going to last a year or 2, or is it going to last me a long time? What's my investment in that? A pencil is a supply, a roof is a capital outlay. But sometimes it's easier to look at a dollar amount versus the codes. Other objects are all sorts of different things. The biggest one in the 600 are fees, and it's also your insurance payment. So when you pay the property insurance, your liability insurance as a district in July, that's one of the large purchases that comes out of that area. Transfers are transfers. So if you have to make any transfers out of the general fund to another fund, there are districts that transfer money every year to the food service fund so that it is sustainable, then it's coded as a 700 as a transfer. And then your 800 objects are contingency in your unappropriated codes that are used for that. So you don't see those very often. Any questions on fund, function, or objects? All right, so those were all expenditures. Revenues look just slightly different in that they don't go into all, they still have 20 digits, but a lot of those digits end up being 0. And so we really focus on these areas when we're looking at revenue. Local sources. So local sources are local revenue. Your biggest source of local revenue is property taxes. That's what you're going to see there. Intermediate sources come from another agency. Local agency, I look at those as your county funds. Sometimes you get, districts get money from their ESDs. And so those are the 2,000 or intermediate sources. State sources are money that comes directly from the state, and your largest is your state school fund payment. But if you look at your grants, those are going to be your high school success, your SIA dollars, And then money that comes from the federal government, and I say from the federal government because it starts with the federal government. There's a lot of federal grants that come from the federal government to ODE, and then ODE disperses those out to districts. And those are still come from the federal government and they're a federal source. And then other sources could be recognizing lease, debt service, things like that. But your biggest one is your fund balance, and it's a 5,400, and that's where you're going to see the fund balances roll forward.
Where would something like timber revenue come?
That is a state payment,
Okay,
even though it comes from the counties.
cool,
That's one of those like, what, you know?
yeah.
Any other questions? All right, so you know about the numbers. You now know a little bit about the budget committee. So let's talk about what the process is. So the process goes through 4 major phases. We have a proposed budget, which you'll receive at your first budget committee meeting. And then there's phase 2, which is approving the budget. And then there's phase 3, which is adopting the budget. And then phase 4 is what feels like sometimes in the business office, even though you guys don't necessarily see it, are all the things that we do to figure out if changes to the official changes to the budget need to happen after adoption, because we know that as soon as we put that budget in writing for you, we're wrong. So during the proposal of the budget, the budget gets created by the business office in this district and is brought to you as a proposal. It includes a whole lot of input from, it's not just created in our office. I joke about that and say that the budget is mine, but we really do ask for input. We do work with our administrators. We look at our collective bargaining agreements. There's lots of ways that we work with people and all the data that we pull in. The budget is prepared by fund. So your budget, the majority in the beginning is in 100, and then about halfway through your budget, you switch to the 200 funds. And you'll see that even though you might have multiple 200 funds listed, they still roll up to one category of just the 200 special revenue funds. And it includes a balanced budget based on estimates. So your revenue and your expenditures always have to match. You can't submit a budget to the state or adopt a budget that is not balanced. It's one of those things that they check. And ODE is really good at checking our work. And if we don't balance, they let us know and we have to come back and fix it. So it's important that we try to get that right the first time and that we don't have to have ODE say, we ran all the numbers and we think you're wrong. I've had that happen and I don't like it. So as part of the proposed budget, there is a statutory minimum requirement. And so sometimes people ask, how can you put all of this information in there? So according to that local budget law manual that I referenced earlier, you actually have to have the actual information from the 2 prior years. And so that's audited information. That is actual data. And then we show you a budget amount for what the year that we're in now. So if we're in 23-24, your budget document this year will show you the adopted 23-24, and it's going to show you the actual data from 22-23 and 21-22. And then you're going to have the proposed amount for next year. So then the budget committee, which we've said consists of board and committee members appointed by the board, meet. They approve the budget. This could happen at 1 meeting. I also have districts that have like 5 meetings. And so this really depends on the need of your district and your community, on the amount of public input that is needed and work that you feel needs to happen within that proposed budget. And I think it's important to say that we can have work sessions before the budget is presented. So that's why we're here tonight. We're not looking at an official document, but we're having a work session to talk about the process and a little bit about what to expect. A lot of times district will use that to really give them larger districts that are anticipating reductions or cuts. They really start working on what that may look like in going forward, or just to provide new members training. So before you get to approve the budget, you're going to hear the message, the budget message. You're going to look at the proposed budget. You get to review and discuss, and again, listen and accept public input and comment. the budget committee gets to ask questions, so I may ask for clarification on a number of things. They can request additional information, and I say but. When you are acting as a committee, it's a request of the whole committee, so it really is not an individual thing, just like the board acts as a board and makes decisions as a board. We ask that, as part of a budget committee process, I, as an individual, don't get to ask Celia to go back and do another 3 hours of work to come back and get one report that I want to see. So if there are large requests or special requests and it's going to take more staff time, I think it's important to make sure that the entire budget committee votes on that, and it's something that the committee wants. If additional information is needed, I always think that if there's a large concern, if you are switching from having your own transportation to switching to a contracted services, that might be information that somebody may say, you know, before we have the meeting, we're probably going to want to know what that looks like and have that. Those requests should always go to the superintendent, not to your individual business manager, because you guys are the boss of the superintendent, and the superintendent is the boss of everybody else. And so keeping those clear lines, I think are really important. It also makes us feel like, as business managers, that we're not trying to answer individual questions. I think that that can get tricky sometimes based on the requests that we've seen. I will say that I have seen. I used to have a budget committee member, and I'll give you an example, that came in and they had 20 questions hand wrote out, and they had already gone through the entire budget process, and they wanted to know things like, how much did you budget for football uniforms? And I'd say, well, athletics, if you look at this page, here's how much we spent on uniforms, or what we're anticipating for uniforms. How much did you spend on football uniforms? I would say, well, it's an estimate. I don't have a number. And so having all of those pointed questions on things that are roll up and are looking at that requires us to go back and say, what do we really expect, and how do I present that in a way that I'm not just focusing on football uniforms, but I'm focusing on uniform replacement schedule. Like, we can replace uniforms once every 3 years. And so we learned ways to work and adapt on what the community needs, and every community and community is different. And so learning that and making sure that you're communicating with your business official and superintendent ahead of time, I think is. And if you request it during the meeting, you really don't like to be wrong. So while we have numbers running through our head all day long, there are times I say an incorrect number. And so just be prepared to say, I don't have the information with me, but we can get back to you if this is a request of the entire budget committee is requested. Any questions on that? All right, so then actions from the budget committee. So the budget committee approves the budget. And you can make changes during the meeting. I think that's an important thing to say. But I always go back to my board, and my budget committee should be making changes based on the 5,000 foot level, which is our fund and function. So if we're really wrong on something, or based on the board's goals and objectives, strategic plan, we somehow did not incorporate something that we should have. Those are the types of changes that we're looking at, not I want to move $100 from line item 100-11-11-0110, blah, 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 to this one line item. Because those level of details don't matter, because you approve at the function level, way up high. Those individual line items are, again, an estimate and only provide what may happen, and it may not. So once the budget committee approves, the board adopts the budget. And so the budget, once you guys approve it as a committee, you get to hear, thank you, you did a great job, and your job is done. And now the rest of the work changes to the board. And I think it's important to know that the board can adopt a budget that is the same that was presented to a budget committee, or it may be different. You guys don't have to approve or adopt the approved budget. And I say that because this happens most often during legislative years when we may not have, well, let's be honest, we haven't had an adopted budget from the state during our budget process through the last couple of legislative processes. But there are times when we may get to June 1st and all of a sudden we know our number. And there might be enough change that we say we'd like to add this to be able to appropriate the money that we now anticipate coming in, or say that we are having money taken away from us, and this is our proposal and how we would adjust to it. I don't think it's a great process for you to come back together and say, hey guys, guess what? We don't have to listen to them, we can do what we want. These are changes that we would make to the approved budget only if there were significant things that we need to consider that were not known at the time that the budget was approved. And your adopted budget must occur before July.
Is there a limit on the variance between the two?
Nope. So during phase 3, then the board adopts the budget. So it requires a budget hearing. Most often this occurs at the time of your regular board meeting. There's usually a line item in there as the budget hearing and adopting it. So you adopt the budget, you make the appropriations, you impose the tax levy, and you categorize the tax. And so those other two pieces are important just to make sure that the Oregon Department of Revenue has all of that information and can collect your local property taxes for you. So I've said appropriations a couple of times, and so appropriations go back to fund and function. And so I'm reminding you of this on the 1,000s, 2,000, 3,000, all the way down to 6,000, because that's the appropriation level. So under instruction, you get to say in the general fund, we appropriate $10 million for instruction. That doesn't say elementary, that doesn't say middle, that doesn't say high school, that doesn't say licensed teacher, it doesn't say classified. You appropriate at the instruction level. So when you're going through the budget, I think it's always important to remember, like, where am I going at the end of this approval or adoption process? I don't have to know every single number or line item in this budget, but what I'm asking is, did we follow processes? Did we gather information? Have we used our current contracts to estimate what our salaries and benefits are going to be next year? What are the steps that we have done? Are we communicating with the steps and COLAs cost us? There's lots of ways to do that, but overall, every year those change. And so to compare those to last year and say, well, how come this one salary line went up or down? Well, probably because the contract changed. There's a new staff member in there. Every one of those, every time you change one factor, everything throughout the budget changes when you recalculate. And again, I highlighted on here appropriated funds versus unappropriated funds. We talked about that, those extra category that is unappropriated. I just think it's always important to remember that they are reserved for future years. They are not available to you no matter what. This could be as part of the local budget law imposing the tax. This is an example of a resolution that you are, here's the amount, and it's for $1,000 of assessed value. And it says a permanent tax rate on that line. It's kind of hard to read, but the permanent tax rate is going to be the same for your district every year. The permanent tax rate is the permanent tax rate. It doesn't get a change, yet you still have to announce that and do this resolution every year. Do you guys have a local option levy? Okay, then we won't worry about talking about local option tax. You also have to categorize the tax. So we're saying what is subject to the education limit and the permanent tax rate and the local option tax. Sometimes those are two separate resolutions. Sometimes it's all part of the same resolution. The language is provided by the Oregon Department of Revenue, and I use their language. I don't make it up because they call you on it and they're like, this is how we want you to write it in the future. And you say, okay, I'll make that change for future. Then we get to the changes after adoption, which is phase 4, and sometimes the most consuming for us, like I said. It doesn't require the budget committee, and the action is only taken by the board if we change the appropriation level. So as a district, your administrators can make the decision to change and move funds from the elementary to the high school. That's all within the instruction function. But if I were to increase instruction and decrease support services, that's where I have to come back and ask for the board to make a resolution in changing that appropriation limit. If it is less than 10% of appropriation category change, the board can do it by resolution. If it is over 10%, you actually have to do a supplemental budget process. And even though you do a supplemental budget process, the budget committee still does not have to come back and be involved in that. You really are just, your job is to approve the budget, and then you are done until the next year when it comes back around again. Any questions on that? So adjustments after adoption, I talked about the appropriation transfer. Supplemental budgets are more than 10%. I also would do a supplemental budget or possibly appropriation. Actually, I do a supplemental budget if your revenue increased. So all of a sudden, if we got a whole bunch of revenue, a new grant, you may have to do a supplemental budget. You could also recognize it as unapproved, as unanticipated revenue, but there's some ways to do that, it's not just you're changing the expenditures, it could be that you're getting more revenue than you had anticipated. You may have to do it if there's expenditures outside of budget law, which I'm not exactly sure, but this is what Oregon Department of Revenue says. I don't know what expenditures are outside of local budget law. I haven't ran across that situation before. And then your other fiscal tools. So if you had interfund loans or eliminating unnecessary funds or any emergency authorizations. And that's all I have. Do you guys have any other questions for me?
Very good.
You want to do this elsewhere too? No, I didn't get out on the city plan today. Would be helpful. Thank you.
Welcome. Stop sharing. No other questions? This is the quietest group I have had in a long time.
Surprise.
They're professional.
That's normal. Brian.
You guys are a quiet group of people.
Any other budget questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's regarding public input and the public members on the committee. So there's a certain point where we're done, we've approved an amendment, which can then be completely ignored by the board as they adopt the future and the final resolution. And even before that, there's the public behind who can make comments that they have to convince us to vote to make any changes in. There's a lot of places to make noise, but no place to make real change without the elected officials. So I just want to make sure I'm getting it.
Correct.
Okay.
Because we're going to take all of you as a committee. And then if you get to the adoption process, they still get to hear public comment during the adoption of the budget, but they would have to then.
So what is the point of this section? What is this bringing to the process? And why are we doing it in April and not at the end of May when we have a much better idea on how much money is actually coming in?
That's a great question.
Right. Try.
All right, so let's talk timing wise. Let's talk first. The development of a budget takes months, and there are timelines built into the local budget law process. So for example, in order to, on our legal postings, either on the website or in the newspaper, you have 5 to 30 days. And then you have this next notice that has to be posted in 5 to 30 days before the next meeting. And then you have 5 to 30 days. So by the time you look at all of that, it has to be spread out enough that if new information does come in, or you have to make a change, you have to have time to go fix it, update, whatever, and still meet the requirements to publicly post that and to meet the next deadline. But if you did it started at the end of May, you don't have enough time in June to get it done.
Okay, so that's why we would start it, but not why we would end it. So, I mean, what I'm saying is the public input that's coming from the non-board members as part of this process is going to be done in theory by the end of this month or the second week of May. The real information that needs to come isn't coming for 4 more weeks. So I guess, and this is the same issue I had when I was on the planning commission, it's what's the point?
So my opinion.
Sure, you have more experience than I do, this is only my fifth year here.
I'm not speaking on behalf. I think that the process actually occurs all year long. So really, the entire budget process starts when the board adopts their strategic plan. And that's all part of those public meetings. So if you're involved with the district and listening and learning throughout the entire year, you're gonna know, be able to provide input on everything. So if you have a new strategic plan and you've had community members and the board has gone through a year of development and here it is, our budget is going to reflect that strategic plan. There's gonna be changes in it because if you say we're gonna focus X amount of resources on every student reading at the third grade level, we're gonna see an increase in staffing or additional resources, reading specialists, whatever it is, in elementary. And I should be able to reflect that in the budget. So I think the input happens because it's important for people to know what's going on. These are your local dollars. These are money collected in your community. And I think people should know how they're being utilized. It's not, but you're right, when you look at the appropriation level, there really isn't a lot of say. So the community can say, we want to spend more money on basketball uniforms, not football uniforms. But again, that really has no change in my budget authority. But you're hearing that input, which may make changes in the future about how you allocate some of those resources at the lower level, or how would we relook at that? Or we change the district process to say, you know what, we've been spending 3 years replacing football uniforms, but only 5 years, every 5 years doing basketball. How do we need to relook at this? I mean, those are some of the things that I think happen at levels that aren't always available to the public. But why public input is still important.
I think I can help you answer Darby. Darby's right, it's spot on. What's the point? But it incorporates a whole another group of people with a whole nother experience. Like you're a business owner. You guys, I think it's Jake on. He's got experience. Gary Manley, he's a community member, and so they talk to other people. They talk to a different group of people than we do. So there's value in that. I think bringing things to the committee. And I find it hard to believe that a board would purposely ignore the choice of the committee and do something totally crazy. It's probably happened, you've seen it, but you know, then you've got elections and to ignore the public, the same thing.
Well, and I appreciate you bringing it up so clearly. It hasn't been obvious in my prior iterations on this board, but I've never seen it done.
Yeah. No, good point.
Where I think you're most likely to see a thing like that is like last year when the legislature was really slow on getting the state school fund determined. And so districts around the state were trying to guess at where that number was going to be. And so we were figuring that 10.0, I think was what we were told was going to be the likeliest thing to get. And so there was a budget written for that. But when it finally came down at the last minute, we got to 10.2. And so, and you know, we were well into the process before the final numbers came down, and sort of somewhat last minute changes had to be made. And had the state been slower, then we definitely would have been post budget process having to amend.
And then it gets people like Brittany involved, people that are interested in the school board and stuff to get her feet wet. So see that here.
And I think it's holding your district accountable for the dollars that are spent in your district. Do they represent what the board has talked about and all of those other pieces? So it's a way for us to present the numbers that go behind all the work.
And then the audit that we have to do annually, make sure that we're spending the amount of money we're supposed to in each category.
So the auditors do check to make sure that you stayed within the budget authority, yes. And if you don't, they say in their letter to you, we found an incident where the district exceeded their expenditure authority mentioned on page blah, blah, blah. Yes, I've been in that experience before too. I really don't like it.
Yeah.
But it happens.
Okay, any further questions, anyone? All right, well, with that, we'll take about a 5-minute break, and budget committee members are free to go. Then we'll have a presentation on PBIS at length. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The one you joined when you want I know, I read into that in August when I thought he was on there and he was telling me that.
Okay, I thought it was on the sheet of paper they had.
Yeah.
All right, we're ready? Back in session. Thank you for coming and giving us this presentation, and I will just let you guys take it away when you're ready.
Does everyone know Bill and Sarah?
No.
This is Bill and Sarah. Why don't you introduce yourselves, and if we could, like, you can see who they are, but if you just introduce yourself and tell them what you've been doing and what you're currently doing, that'd be helpful, I think. How far back am I going?
Says you're a principal here.
10 years past.
10 years, yeah. I've been in the, my name is Bill Bechen. I've been in the district 10 years as a principal. I did my first 5 at London and the last 5 here at Lincoln. Prior to that, I was a principal at Laurel Elementary in Junction City and an assistant at the high school there for a while.
What are you gonna do the next 5 years?
Well, this is I have 2 months left or I'm out the door and I'm still contemplating that, something outdoors for sure. And just probably just something to kind of keep the lights on and gas money. So, yeah, I'm trying to discover what's next.
Again,
Pardon me?
math teaching again?
I don't think so. I was kind of looking back since I entered kindergarten to this moment in time. I think there's been a total of 3 years that I haven't been in education in some form. So I think there's time to see what else is out there. Anyway, that's kind of what I'm
My name is Sarah Drew. I am the assistant principal at Lincoln. Prior to that, I taught mostly 4th grade at Harrison. And before that, I taught 4th and 5th grade at William L.C. in Eugene. Total teaching 15 years, and this is my second year in administration.
She's fabulous.
All right, well, we've been working for the past week to prepare some materials for you and to go through some things that will help you to see a couple of things. One, to see some of the things that have been happening at Lincoln for the last year or 2, depending on what we're talking about, but also to see what we're doing in response to some recent input that we've had, and I want to kind of go through that a little bit. I'm going to do a quick intro, and then the rest of the time we'll hear from Bill and Sarah. But a wise philosopher once said, really it was Christine Aguilera, actually, but so it wasn't a wise philosopher, but there's always a positive to those negative times because you come out of it so much stronger and wiser. And I know, Colleen, you wanted me to use a Taylor Swift reference, but I couldn't find one. The thing is that I can't comment on specifics that happened at Lincoln over the past month. There's a lot of the story that I would love to discuss, but it's in violation of individuals' rights, and I won't do that. But we take all of what we know. We know a lot of more of the whole story, and we're taking what we know and trying to make it into a positive. Okay, so we've had some complaints that have come forward, bringing to light some concerns, and so we're using that as a positive and finding ways to find out more about those and to make changes that would prevent those types of things from happening. Last time, several complaints from other district parents were mentioned. And those that were shared with us, we looked at, several of which weren't about Lincoln at all. One of which was about Lincoln and was back when I was principal, and I think about 15 years ago. And then there was 4 or 5, 5 were from Lincoln, and we, as a group, looked at those. There was one that they were going to follow up on to make sure that kiddo was feeling better about the situation, but they knew about those other situations and had already dealt with them. But again, what can we do in looking at those situations to make the future better for those kids? Because even if there was misbehavior by a kid and we handled it 100% correctly, there was a misbehavior by a kid that caused damage to another kid, and we ought to look at it and make sure we can prevent it in the future. So again, taking this situation and looking how we can make positive changes. Youth truth data.
isn't where we want it to be. But what are we doing about that data? How are we finding out? The youth truth data, as well as any data that you'll see today, tells you the what. Okay, it tells you that 37% of people did this, or we have this many behavior referrals in fighting, or this many behavior referrals in defiance. But what it doesn't tell you is why. And that's one of the things that we want to take the opportunity to find out. And there's one really good way to find out why, and that's to talk individually to people, and we have that as part of our plan. That I'll share with you here in a second. And then also there's just been a sentiment shared both here and online that Lincoln isn't doing anything in response to the behavior that happens. And again, not true, but have we shared that in a way with you in public so that people know what we do? Because we can't share individual consequences and that sort of thing, but we can share some other things that we're not necessarily sharing. So what more can we share? This is another opportunity for us to take a look at what we're doing and change some things. And so I just want to give you a little bit of a sneak peek, and then we're going to chat with you for a while. Today we're going to share some things with you about what we're doing and what we're planning to do. It's been interesting is a consequence of this. We've had some students, because we've continued to work with those students from those issues that were made public. We've had some students reconcile some things that were seemingly unreconcilable for the past year or two. So we've had students reconcile. We've had at least one parent that went from what's the opposite of an ally?
She's very concerned.
Yeah, she was very concerned, and she's is working with us now, is on the parent club and doing some really good work with us. Good consequences of this. Our team and their team has looked closer at behavior. We're reviewing all the things that we do with behavior at Lincoln, and I think that's good. We've reviewed the supervision schedule. So there's a very tight supervision schedule that we have for our staff, and we've reviewed that, and we're revising that based on input that we've received. And then we found some ways to provide information and to get information. And that's what I'll talk to you about at the end. But then it includes doing interviews with students and parents, and making sure that we know the why behind the what. And it also includes doing some things differently next year so that we're sharing more information with parents about what we're focused on in school, the behaviors we're focused on, how behaviors are going, how students are doing with behavior, and what we're working on to help them improve and that sort of thing. So I'll go over all of that at the end, kind of what we're doing in response to all that both we've learned and we've heard. But Bill and Sarah, why don't you take it away and share some, and you want to pass it just to there, and then go ahead and take one of the.
So we talk about the behavior data. We have a database called Swiss, and we put in all of our minor referrals and our major referrals. It's in there. We can take a look at the data. I want to go back to something that Brian said, that sentiment out there seems to be, at least to some degree, to some folks, is we're not doing anything. And I think that when I reflect on these situations, I know that I always err on the caution of the student confidentiality side, and possibly to a fault. And that's something that I think that just in our discussions moving forward, there's some ideas that have come up about, oh, why didn't I think of that? So I want you to know that Christina Aguilera is smarter than we think she is, because our good things are already starting to happen. But I wanted to look at the data real quick, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, just kind of give you an overview. The first page is average referrals per day per month. And you can see, for instance, in September, there's like a little over 2 per day. And these are major referrals. And you can see some spikes.
So what's a major referral?
A major referral is what's a major behavior record. And it's we look at behaviors through three lenses: duration, intensity, and frequency. So there's behaviors that happen a lot, but aren't real intense, or don't, like kid blurting out. And we have actually interventions for that. A kid that's argumentative, kids that want to argue with teacher, don't follow directions. And then intense short duration would be like a fight, right? Something that happens like that. It's over in 5 seconds, 8 seconds. It's just that fast. So majors can be created typically with this shorter duration, smaller intensity, but frequent behaviors, we have minors that just kind of record the data for us, keeps a record. Yes, we talked to the kid, or we talked to the parent, we did this. And if you can see if that builds through a process, then we say, okay, this is major, we need to do more. So it's a progressive way of looking at discipline. And so the high intensity, short duration, like a fight, would be a major right now. A profanity directed at a staff member right now. Hate speech, anything based on race, ethnicity, gender, being who you are, your size, whatever. Those things we deal with right now. We have reteaches for those too. So these are major referrals. These are the ones that rise. These are the most important, or I guess serious behaviors. Is what this reflects. Okay. You see a spike, higher bars in November and in March. We anticipate those. Those are things that if we were to look at a year-to-year graph, it would have basically the same shape to it. And we know that those are high stress times. Right around November, we start the holiday season, the anticipation for winter break. And we do things for that. I'll talk a little bit later. As we get into spring break, that's another big time. Okay. So we turn the page. Referrals by behaviors. If you go clear over to the, I guess it's the left, your left, out of bounds. And honestly, I think that, I'm not sure. I think that means off campus, because there's just one little thing there and I have to look that up, but I'm not sure. And then on the other side, it's physical aggression. Now, physical aggression can be a minor, and it could be like tussling in line, or it can be something more direct, like just jumping on a kiddo and tackling them and hitting them down. As opposed to a fight, that's where there's true intent to inflict like pain or injury, and oftentimes it's mutual. There's actual back and forth that goes with that. So there's a little difference there. Inappropriate language, that's another biggie for us, and skipping harassment at party, so on and so forth. The table below just shows the frequency of each of those things. Okay. I'm just looking at the notes. Okay, let's turn the page. Referrals by location. We keep track of where these things happen. And the first thing you notice is what? Where do most of our referrals occur?
In the class.
In the classroom, where kids spend most of their time. In the class. And so this is that frequent, ongoing thing that runs up usually. Now, we do have some incidents that occur in class that are intense, but mostly it's those things that build up. Next place is common areas, outdoor common areas. It could include the cafeteria, but I guess I would say cafeteria. So that'd be common area, like courtyard, out on the track at recess, that sort of thing. And then down below, referrals by time. You see 8 o'clock, there's a tall bar. You see 9:30, 10 o'clock. You see noon, and you see end of the school day. Or those are more structured times. We have more kids in the hall during the middle of the day with lunch transitions, that sort of thing. Okay, next page is just continue of all that incident by time. Referrals by student. So, oh, okay, my mind isn't blacked out. I freaked out for a minute. Sorry. And so we've got some students. They have 3 students that have almost 16 referrals, major referrals each. Right, that's a lot. Okay. Here's what I would like to show you. So this page here with the triangle on it. Notice that is last year, and then the second triangle on the next one. If you take a look at those two, this is design. This is the pyramid, the PBIS pyramid. And in an ideal system, you notice that there's a green, yellow, and red. And in that ideal system, 80% of students that would fall into the green. That means students with 0 or 1 referral for the year. Okay. Then about 15% would end up in the yellow. That's 2 to 5 referrals. The red is greater than 6 or more. Okay. The distribution there is that's what we're shooting for: 80, 15, and 5. So if we look at last year, and I want you to refer to the table down here where it says, because it's easier to read, 0 to 1 referrals are on the right hand side. 73.33% of kids have 0 or 1. That was last year. We were below our 80%, right? 0 or 1. We had 17% in the yellow and 9% or so at 6+ in the red zone. 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, we implemented what's called the A team, which is the red team. It's high intensity interventions for kids we meet on a weekly basis. We're still getting our feet under us for this last year. I'd like you to turn the page and look at the next one. This is this year's data, year to date. And again, those tables, we have 82% of our kids in the green. 12.8 in the yellow. And just a little under 5% in the red. When I look at this, this is good news to our systems. What ends up at the end of the year, we'll see, but that's where we are now. Any questions on the triangle? The pyramids, triangles?
Sir, could you note how many what is the raw number of kids that would represent currently that are at 0 to 1 referrals?
Okay, oh, that shows in the table. Thank you, Harry. So in the table here, let's read this year's from left to right. You have the school year. There's 475 kids represented in this. There are 321 of those kids that don't have any major referrals. Okay. There are 70 kids that have 1 referral. So remember, the green is the combination of the 0 and 1. Students with 0, students with 1. Then 2 to 5, 61, 6 to 8, 7, and then we have 16 with 9 or more. And I had a stat here that I wanted to share with you. I wrote it on the other one. 52% of our major referrals are generated by 22 of our students. Wow. We spend a lot of time with high intensity, high needs kids that we spend a lot of resources on. We go deep, and I'm going to share some of those tools with you a little bit later. Any other questions on the page? Thank you.
These graphs are great.
Yeah. So we rely on these, especially in the green team. We have 3 teams. We have green team, yellow team, and red team, which is A team, the advocacy team. The green team's charge is to look at the school-wide data, our weight 80%, and to look at that first graph, where do we see most of our referrals happening through the year? What can we do in anticipation of that happening? We know every March is rough. So what do? We do March Gladness, try to reduce that. We look for incentives to do that. Calling up on the holidays. Let's have a holiday store so everyone can participate. It doesn't cost you any money. You just have to do what's expected. You get holiday bucks. Let's pay that way. So we do those things. And for the kids that doesn't work for, they move up to the yellow, and there's a process for that. I'm going to ramble on if you want me to. So I'm going to stop there because there's some of this in here later.
So then the next section that we're gonna send your way is our truth data regarding safety. And so the youth truth surveys go out to students, to families, and to our staff. And you have to turn the page to get to that first data points table. So they're asking questions in here like, I feel safe in school. You can see that first column is the December of this year, the school year, and then that second column is the December one from last year with 2022. And then you can also see a typical youth truth school and then our typical South Lane school. So in these, the next page also has the family, and then the last one is the staff, so you can see that. And there's different questions that they ask for the different populations that they're surveying. But most of the scores, there's a slight decrease, and so we're talking about, well, why is that? What is it that is or isn't in place that is making kids not feel safe, or families? But there are some positive notes too. There are some things that have gone up, like that first question, I feel safe during school, that has increased a little bit. But then you have those follow-up questions like, okay, well, what are the contributing factors that are making you feel unsafe, or making you feel like you can't advocate for a friend who might be in a situation where they feel like they are bullied or something like that. So that's going to be part of our next steps. Like, what do we do with this information? on the next slide, you have the family survey. And there's a couple positive jumps there, and one decrease. But they're asking different questions like my child's learning environment is safe, my child is safe from bullying during school. And then that last section is staff. So some of those numbers increase and one decrease too. But those are the questions that we want to look for more information into, and we have a plan to do so.
It might be helpful to tell you that plan now, because we're talking specifically about the youth through survey. We've done some work with a person at the University of Washington over the past 3 years, working on making sure that that's where we did our mission and vision work, and where we came up with our work and our focus for us as a district, and I think it's the same focus that you have as a board. I mean, we've done work with her over the last couple of years. Remember how we used to have like 1 million different initiatives, and we focus now on just the initiatives that are most important. That was working with her. One of the things that she's taught us is how to, I mean, there's satellite data that tells you what, but doesn't tell you why, but street data tells you why. And there's a lot of different ways to get street data, but one of the best ways is to talk one-on-one with students, with families, with whomever. That's the way, that's where you get the why do you feel the way you feel? And then you take a bunch of people's whys and you get patterns and things that you can do to change the why. And so we've asked her to come back in a few weeks to train specifically a team of folks from Lincoln and including some of us from here to adapt that. We've done a lot of work with student interviews. We've done student interviews at many of our schools, done a lot of them at Drina, a lot of them at Cottage Grove High School. There's been some done, I think, at most schools now, but we want to concentrate some specific interviews for students and families on getting more information about the why from the youth truth data. And we'll do that between, we're training the first week in May, and then we'll do interviews between then and the end of the year, and then be able to use that information to make plans for the following year on what changes we can make to culture at Lincoln and to things that happen at Lincoln that make sense to the people that we talk to. They're also doing this work as a staff, but that's one piece of the data. They're getting information from staff as they work from staff, but if we're really going to change the survey results or change how people are feeling, you have to find out why, and then you have to do something about that. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, so I'm gonna pass out the big packets.
Yeah.
This is some of the work that we're like very proud of, all the systems and things that we have in place to help support students that are popping up on our radar. Get back. I think.
Yeah. Is this me?
Sure.
Okay, we're holding this tag team. Yep.
Was this one?
This packet, no,
I
this
think
is,
it mentions some of the things in.
yeah, these are specific tools that they'll talk about that they're using.
I guess I can look into the so. Okay, so go back to the image of the pyramid, and those are tiers. Tier 1 is green, tier 2 is yellow, tier 3 is the red. And the intensity of the intervention increases as you go up. So what we do at the school to begin with is this first sheet is a matrix, their behavior matrix, and it's PBIS 101. They teach us that we need to clearly define the expectations for students, not just in general, but in specific locations. Behavior in a cafeteria is going to look different than behavior out in the courtyard. It's going to look different than in the classroom. So let's be specific about that. And one of the tenets of PBIS is making sure that you recognize kids doing what's expected. And that's where we can add different incentives like the tiger tickets. You've seen those in the elementary schools. We do those things at Lincoln as well. So we do have it everywhere of all of the time. You could just call that let's be as human as possible row. And those are just things that expect to use appropriate volume in areas, clean up after yourself, those things that can kindergarten. The next page is Ready Room. We've had this in place for a few years. And it says, come when you're ready to cry, shut down or blow up, leave when you're ready to learn. And so the idea that we started with here was teaching the kids to be able to kind of monitor their own, where they were, where their homeostasis is, so to speak. We use this analogy. This is the model of the brain. These are the frontal lobe, and this is the amygdala in here, hidden in here. When we're all in good place, that frontal covers up that amygdala, which is tasked with just survival. And as we start to escalate our behaviors, it slowly comes unraveled. And there are signs, our face gets hot, our stomach starts to churn. We're teaching those kids that, okay, I need a break. And they go to the ready room. And sometimes it takes 5 minutes, sometimes it takes a little longer. And we've tracked that over time. Student choice break, teacher given break, point cards, not kids in crisis. Kids that are emotionally, they need intense. They would be called in with the 18. The next thing I have in here is just athletic code of conduct, more expectations of behaviors in a specific location. I'm not going to go through those, it's pretty standard. And then we have things, these teacher tools. This next one, the disruptors, is an example of some professional development we've done with our staff to deal with disruptive students. So we have those, and we have about every month, maybe sometimes more often than every month, we have flash trainings, which go over something like this, some kind of training. The amygdala training, the escalation cycle was part of that early on in the year for teachers. Speaking of escalation cycle, this is it. This is a tool that teachers can use to say, if you can recognize a student in the calm phase or the triggering event, here's what to try. Connect with the student and use positive reinforcement, etc. So it's a tool that we've given to teachers, and we've specifically gone over this at the beginning of each year, last couple of years. Next page is a flow chart. There's a lot going on here. You'll notice that the first 3 rectangles are green. Those deal with the green zone of the pyramid. This one's mostly about the yellow zone. Okay, so kids who are having a difficult time behaviorally maintaining those expectations in the green zone, our very first step is in the yellow is teacher request for intervention. We call it a 3-week plan. And that starts off the process of getting them. The next page is that request for intervention. Okay, and you can see it says, by submitting this request, I understand it will take at least 3 weeks for the iterations put in place. This is my plan until then. So they made a request for intervention, and then we ask the teacher to come up with a plan, and they consult with us too, the A team and the yellow team, to create a plan, and with their teams. Okay, and then a plan is created at the yellow, and it's implemented.
So that'd be a kiddo who's starting to have more behaviors and starting to have issues that aren't just answered by the regular things that we do. Correct.
So a lot of times these are the kiddos that are having a hard time just being in class. They're fidgety, they're calling out, they're disruptive, they're not following the expectations within the classroom. And so one of the things we do is often is a check-in, check-out. Okay. And so in the morning, they have a significant adult, they have a point card probably, and they check in, we give them a pep talk, they have some incentive they're working for. And then at the end of the day, they check out, they have a goal, point goal. So if there's 50 points in the day, it might be an 80% goal. If they reach that, then they get some small incentive, and then maybe they're looking for a larger incentive later on down the
It's
road.
also a time to see if they're handling, if there's any issues that they have coming up for them, and we can work through those too.
Absolutely. The next few pages are examples of point cards. This one's, I guess they're the same. Complete at least responsible, respectful, and safe. Those are the headers that we always put on these. Complete at least half of each assignment, stay on task, use school supplies correctly, raise your hand to talk, and be positive and kind. And this is the different ones there.
And those expectations are tailored for each kid and what the things that they might need help with. That the yellow team has decided, like, okay, these are the things that they could use some support and positive reinforcement for doing.
I'm working with the young man. I'm a check-in, check-out point person for a young man right now. And each day he works for a honey bun. That's what he wants, a honey bun, but not any honey bun. He wants it heated for 11 seconds, not 10. 11 seconds in the microwave, and he's right. They change it, they're good. So attendance focus point card. We have work passes. says responsible, clean the day's assignment turned in, be on time to class, be kind and patient. And there's incentives built into that as well. So these are yellow zone type interventions. Let's see. Okay, this is a tool for those of us that are going to mentor these kids. There's a lot going on there. Sorry, we have quiet lunches. We have 2 lunches at Lincoln. Each one has a quiet lunch. They spend their time in room 40, which is our SEL's room, our Joseph's room. It gives them a place. These are kids that get overstimulated. Maybe your shyer students. They have a place to go. We have about 15 kids in each one. All right.
And sometimes they also have the opportunity to go to the library too.
Yes, we have a lot of kids that go to the library. I mentioned behavior reteaches. This is at the yellow level as well. So if there's a kiddo that used hate speech, one of the first things we want to do is make sure they understand the expectations, and there might be a couple students, 3 students, 4 students, or maybe it's a kid that blurts out. We have a blurting out. Well, they're all listed here. Behaving like a human at lunchtime. That's a class they go to during our flex period, which is our intervention period, and they get taught a lesson for that 30 minutes, and there's a lesson and usually some writing that happens there. Okay, so you can see we've done all of these: understanding and responding to hate speech, matching your language to the situation, responding with respect, honoring personal space, play fighting. Play fighting is a real problem. Let me tell you. In middle school, they are so physical, and they bump into each other, they jump on each other's back, and it always starts off as, "Oh, I'm just kidding," and maybe they were, but a lot of times it doesn't end up there. That's the problem with it. Flirting and interrupting, dress code. Is it a big deal? Are you making a big deal out of a little deal? What is it? Effects of stress and vaping. I want to talk about vaping. Vaping is hard to track down. We tried to put vape detectors in the bathrooms, and weren't able to do it because the wiring and the wireless ones went out of business. And they're very difficult. But what we have done, and what I'm very proud of, is we've implemented the in-depth program, which is the American Lung Association's. It's not a cessation program, but it's an education program. So if a student is caught vaping, that's the first step. It's not suspension. They go to, I think, 3 2-hour sessions on Wednesdays after school. And so it's their time, and we teach them through this. And I can think of only one. I think I don't know how many kids have had through that. 6, 8, and there's one that just wouldn't buy in, but the others seem like we're getting through them. Is it going to change it? I'm not sure, but at least we're educating them and the parents. So, yeah.
So have you rolled out any kind of information, like education piece, to the whole school about vaping?
We did.
Yeah, I wasn't here when that happened. Go ahead.
We got a grant to have the police claims it on this website. The #1 requested assembly person on this topic, vaping. He came to our school, and we also invited the middle school from London and Dorina to come to our school, and it was broken into 3 different sessions where he was talking to 6th graders about it, and then a 7th grade session, and then an 8th grade session. Prior to those assemblies, we had a parent night for parents to come and learn about. I mean, I was schooled in this because it turns out I really don't know very much about vaping and all the different ways that it can be packaged to be discreet and hidden in like a highlighter, things like that. And so it was really eye-opening for me and for the students too. So we had this opportunity. I wish that we had more people coming in for it, but we did offer that. And we got, at the end of each session, the presenter asks kids to, without any consequences, if they have vapes on them, to turn them in, and we had kids turn in vapes. Not a lot, but a handful. And so I think it made an impact, and we want to keep having the opportunity to do that sort of thing, keep the education part. Thank you. Any other questions about that?
Yeah, I'm just sad that I missed that, but I heard, and what I thought was most powerful is kids in a public setting were saying, "Here's my vape." I mean, that's, I don't know. And so, anyway, let's see, what's this? Lunchtime expectations. Acting like a human. This is one of the group reteach, which that's what this is. Acting like a human at lunchtime.
So you talk about reteaches, Bill, but one thing that we talked about and pointed out that reteaches help the behavior long term. there are also consequences that go along with them, so it's not just to reteach. There's a consequence, and in the case of the vaping, the consequence is 6 hours,
Yes.
right? I mean, even though it's education, it's 6 hours. Because you do have to consequence behaviors, you can't just do the reteach.
And that's for the first offense. And so I don't think that we've had anybody get past that first.
We haven't. I mean, there'll be a suspension attached to that. On the
There's a
second.
second, and so we have a whole continuum of based on how many times it's happened to the point of like, okay, parent meeting, intervention, looking at outside resources and cessation programs and things like that.
Yes, cessation, my understanding is that's everyone, for us to have this in-depth programming, we had to be trained and certified to be able to teach it and just to have it. So that we're doing it to their fidelity standards. And I think there's a cessation piece later on that maybe we hopefully will get to, but right now we're just in the educational piece. Okay, so yes, we do have consequences for behaviors, and this is where you don't hear what happens. We can't share this with anybody but the families of the student that we're dealing with at a given time. So our consequences go everywhere from simple detention to restitution. We had a piece of personal property broken. There was some after school time for that, but also discussion about restitution and how they're going to repay that. Sometimes it's working in that school, sometimes it's direct payment from the family to the student. We had a few years ago, it was a cell phone that got busted out or something. So we have lots of parent meetings, behavior plans, safety plans, abbreviated schedule, and celebrations. I'm just read off my list here. Let me go through some of those. This one here, this is meeting for so-and-so's little Billy's success, me. But this is the general format that we use in trying to kind of bring the parents in and help understand what we can do as a school and as a team to help the student be more successful. Welcome to share the goal, helping so-and-so be successful. Oftentimes there's something that we know about the student. In this case, it was go to military school and be a paramedic, wants to buy a house, grades, attendance, point card data, and then review the possible options for possible schedule change, intervention changes, possibly a referral to special education, reduced day, or even an alternative placement. And at the end of this presentation, I'll talk to you a little bit about the number of kids that have gone into each of those. Okay. The most important part here is involving the parents and the students. Then we do kind of, this is called an informal behavior plan. So if we have a kiddo that has very consistent types of behavior that maybe is consistently disruptive, consistently falling out of their chair or whatever it might be, touching others, shutting down. If you see this, remind or redirect, offer 2 options for him to do and walk away for 2 to 3 minutes. It doesn't do any good to sit and hover over that student and they'll just get defiant. In most cases are shut down. Defiance looks differently. Sometimes it's put the head down, not respond. Other times it's saying, I'm out of here, just march off. So this is a specific behavior plan that our SEL puts together with the A team. This is a tool we've used a few times, and this one is like, I love this. So what you're seeing is the final plan. This is for students that may get into some pretty significant problems that need significant changes to their day. And this might be for say, a victim of an incident where what you see here is in this gray area, these are the decisions or the choices that were made as a team with the student there, the family, the team. And typically what it is in this other column over here, I guess, is the menu. Okay, and I think she's rearranged it here. So there's a menu of this. So if we look at the first one, schedule. So no class with aggressor, it says students chosen plan, but one option would be students 1st and 5th classes spot. The other column would be talk to counselor for concern rights, something simple like that. And when we talk about it, it's best and it's not. We haven't used this too many times, and it's relatively new, but I can tell you right now, it's something that we're going to have to revisit. If no plan we put in place, there's always holes and there's ways to circumvent it, get it creative, right? So this is a student safety plan. Step up plan. if we agree as a team, and when I say team, I'm talking about the students and the parents, that a shorter day is in order because of behaviors, then we might go down to, say, a 3-period day. And what we need to have in place is a way to get back to a full 6-period day. And this is the step-up plan, and this is what we fill out. And it says when they reach, after 3 weeks, if they have no referrals and have completed most of their work at keeping up, whatever the targeted behaviors are, then they go to the next level, we add back a class or 2 classes. We haven't used this extensively lately, but it is an effective way of working with students that need that. Next page. Oh. We're trying to figure out how to celebrate these things, because we're having kids exit these plans successfully. So if you go to the very last page, it's not the very last page. Here's an example case study of a student. This is a student that was having some real issues. Teacher narratives, student X, class clown, always moving around, getting attention, blurt outs, off tasks, falling out of chairs, touching and kicking other students, just no boundaries, and not just nonstop. Behavior records or referrals. December 8th had 15, 5 for fighting or inappropriate physical contact, 5 for tardies, 2 for defiance, harassment, property misuse, and technology violations. So a request was submitted October 23rd for intervention from a teacher team. And it shows everything that we did there. Digital behavior tracker. This is like a point card, but only the teachers see it. It's on Google Docs. And the teacher at the end of the day or end of the period just plugs in what they see at a number or the comments. That way the student, it's like doing an observation, which class and the student doesn't know. 3-week point review point. November 27th, parent meeting was decided that a paper point card would be best option. Then we kept him up with our dean, Zane Butler. And I got to tell you, Zane Butler, having him in that position this second year, he's building, I'm going to cry in a minute. You can see that coming. He's building young men. He's taking these kids that are right on the edge and pull them back, and holding their feet to the fire. He calls them out, has them do stuff, goes and picks up trash, flex, whatever, and they say thank you. You know, and then they get in trouble again. But it's getting better. You've got to have a significant adult in the building, and that's what we're working towards. And Zane, he's 6'7". He just commands it, right? But he is. The reason we tapped him was because when you went into his classroom, kids wanted to be there. It was under control, and kids were learning. He was the perfect choice for this job, and he's made a difference at our school. And he made a difference in this young man's life. So if you turn it over, back there. No. April 11, at this moment, student is averaging 95% on his point cards, not receiving any referrals since December 8th. This was a tough kiddo. Okay, he just needed that direction and instruction. All right, last page, finally, snapshot of status of interventions at Lincoln Middle School. The total number of requests for intervention received this year is 56. Active interventions, 36. Students who successfully exited their interventions, 11. On track to exit is 6. Now, these are kids that are in yellow, or I mean in red. Worked their way to the red, maybe top of yellow. And then the last part there, students who received an alternative placement was 9. I referred to this a little bit earlier. Our bridge is our high intensity behavior. You need to be in there. You need a referral from SPED. We have 4 students that have moved there. Community classroom 1, Child's Way, which is up Green Away 2, Willamette Leadership 1, and Tutoring 1. Now we can't put a kid in like Willamette Leadership, but this is discussions with the parents and families that they say, what are our options? And they go out and find it and say, well, let's give it a try. One of the things that's most encouraging in my career in dealing with behaviors and families is walking them through the process of this is what's happening at school with your child. Yes, they act differently at school than they do at home. It's a different environment. They're in front of their hundreds of peers. And a lot of times parents are very resistant because they don't see that student at home. And you walk them through, and it may take years. And the next thing you know is like they understand. And we're a team where it becomes first, it's a little bit, we're not trusting each other. And it works closer and closer and closer. And that they start in elementary and work through middle. But it's got to happen through middle before it gets to high school. That's all I have to know.
So the one thing I'll point out that Bill was referring to, those 9 students that had another placement. This is where you find many of those students is those students with the most referrals. That's alarming when you think of the percentage of students that take up so many of our referrals. It takes up so much of their time. Not that we ever want a student to go elsewhere, but sometimes that's the best place for them. And so whether it's through a conversation with Bill and Sarah, or whether it's a realization after meeting with the parents, or whether it's a placement that we make, which that happens as well. Sometimes we have expulsions as well, where we get to a point where we can no longer, our system is not working for a student, or they do something so severe that we have no other option but to expel them from school. And we've had to do that in the past from several of our schools, and we don't like to do that, but we're not afraid of doing that when the behavior reaches that level.
I'm sorry, can I
Go
just
ahead.
chime in real quick? I wanted to know that everything we do to different degrees are team-based. We have, like I said, green team, yellow team, and red team, especially through advocacy team, yellow and the advocacy team. It is an ongoing collaboration. Advocacy meets every Thursday for at least an hour. Usually it takes longer. And we go kid by kid by kid through what are we doing? Where are they now? And just monitoring them. And yellow meets every other week, I believe. Yeah. And so those groups are empowered to make those decisions with these kids and with the parents. So I just want you to, it's not a one-sided one. I think we should do this and just go off and do it.
No, sir, can I maybe see if you could chime in about one other thing? So the front page of this, you talked about the expectations throughout the school. The rest of this packet is how you respond when you notice students aren't doing well. Can you talk a little bit more about the proactive, like what does this look like at the start of the year, advisory lessons, daily check-in, Google Form, that sort of thing?
Yeah, the expectations, we typically teach at the beginning of the year. And what we do is the teachers we'll teach it out a second period, or we'll teach, I don't know how we organize it, throughout the day. And they'll take their class to, okay, so now we're in the cafeteria, here are the expectations, and they go through this. We have an advisory class that I mentioned Flex earlier, 33-minute period, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, allows for intervention, academic intervention, support. Wednesday's advisory class, where we talk about these things. We have specific slideshow lessons. And that's where we do a lot of our education. We did that on hate speech, we've done that on vaping. So whenever something comes up or we anticipate, a lot of that teaching occurs in advisory.
And that's the whole school.
That's the whole school, yeah.
And then, like, for example, this year, we know it's an issue, or our EAs were like, hey, we need to go over our expectations in the cafeteria again. So we used flex time and brought in our students, like
by lunches.
By lunches, okay, these kids are coming at this time, and redid the expectations this time though with our EAs giving those presentations so that they can see the EAs, the people who are supervising those places in action and have their exact verbiage for what their expectations are, and even they did some demonstration. But with this, we also do one typically when we come back from winter break. It's just kind of like a refresh of those expectations and such. But we also hand out those tiger tickets and have things like once they reach a certain level in our tiger ticket container, we do Fantastic Fridays, or we'll have like a fun assembly. So there are school-wide incentives that go along with making sure that you're doing the things that we expect from the get-go, And so that's our PBIS screen. And we've done those things where we've looked at the data and said, hey, we need more support here. For example, we notice when kids come back from their lunch, they come in a little heightened, and you can see the data, it's still clear. So we talked about doing some activities when kids come in to like regulate and bring down that energy back so they can focus and concentrate. So we had that during one of our flash trainings for our whole staff. And so we're trying to respond to the data as we collect it and see it and notice where there could be some issues and problems. But there's still work to do and always to be improving.
I mean, it's the nature of the job.
So our next steps are these, and definitely ask questions. So we're going to train for the parent and student interviews on May 1st, and we'll do those between May 1st and the end of the year. There's a parent night on May 9th. And this wasn't planned before, but they've added a section of the parent night to touch on behavior. What they're doing, and they'll take questions and concerns at that time as well. We're starting Bill mentioned that during that flex time, we teach students one of the curriculum that we use across the district at secondary is called Character Strong. Character Strong is looking at putting in a bullying prevention piece into that curriculum. And what we're working with Character Strong to do is to do a pilot with our leadership class with that new curriculum that's not public yet. And they're going to do a pilot with our class, and they'll be able to provide feedback to the company. But what it will do for us is it will show us what we can use next year in our flex class, but it will also empower that student council to hear the curriculum and also then to provide input both on the curriculum and also on what the curriculum is trying to prevent. So giving more student voice to students with that process. They're also reviewing and revising the supervision schedule to make sure that there's adequate supervision at all times. Sometimes, to be honest, what does happen is when a class ends, for example, let's say I'm at the very end of a hallway. If you know Lincoln, there's what I used to call the finger hallways, right? And at the end of a finger hallway, that's where you have your class, and you let out class and you're supposed to do hall duty. You have a classroom of kids that you're saying, scat, get out of here, and so that I can get down to the end of the hallway. And sometimes there's a need, and we're trained to meet the needs of kids. And so there are times where teachers have a hard time getting out. And so that's one thing that the staff, that the administrators are looking at. Okay, how do we even provide more supervision than we have before, to where when those things happen, there's still adequate supervision.
Right.
I've done some checks in the hallways. Bill, I visit Bill and Sarah once a week. But even last week, I went to the middle school and just walked around to look at the supervision. And the supervision is there. Sometimes misbehaviors happen right in front of the supervisor. Because again, if you think of high school kids will do it in a corner where there's no camera and there's no. I'm generalizing.
Smarter as they get
Well, no,
older.
but it's also development. It's also development, and I'm oversimplifying this. But at the middle school, there's a much quicker reaction time and a lot less thinking that happens. When I was the middle school principal, I used to call it ready, fire, aim, because you go right to the action without thinking about it, and that's part of development. And so we know that, and so what can we do? Yes, more adults around does help, and so that's another thing that they're looking at. And then we're looking at ways next year that we can communicate what we're doing with behavior to parents. So they have attacked several behaviors this year. I know they advertised the vaping, but some other behaviors that they focused on, like the lunchroom behavior and other behaviors, they haven't necessarily told parents that's what they were doing. And that's a really good idea. Make sure parents know what we're working on. Again, 80% of our students are usually doing it right, but it's still good for parents to know what we're working on. If we're having a particular issue with profanity or with bullying or with whatever it might be, why aren't we communicating that with parents? Let's be transparent, but also let's make sure they know what their students are dealing with at school so that they can advocate for their kiddos and know about what's going on before it comes out in a newspaper article or on Facebook or what have you. So that's something that we're going to look at this summer after we've had the opportunity to see the input from parents and students. So those are the main things. Did I miss anything else that we're doing?
The district is doing the SEL panorama survey, just kind of, the panorama is a company that allows us to check and see what social emotional skills kids have, like what are their strengths and what are some areas for growth. And so we're just now implementing that, just testing it out, but that will give us some data to figure out like if we're going to do some social groups and teach some kids some skills, like where are their needs, and we can group them together and start creating things like that too.
And the last thing I'll say is that Jeremy and I are intimately involved in this, because between Jeremy, Bill, and I, we've been the principal for 20 years. And doesn't make any one of us an expert, but we are well versed in middle school behavior and the things that we need to do to lessen that behavior, or to lessen that behavior. You can never eliminate all behaviors that happen in the middle school because of that thought process, because of the development. There's a lot you can do to prevent things, and that's what we're working on as a team.
I want to mention two things that we do that I'm pretty proud of. We do an electronic check-in every morning when their kids get there. They have a 0 period that's attached to their first period. And there's like 3 questions on there. One's a silly question, again, pick one, but something
Would
goofy.
you rather go to the mountains or the coast or something?
Yeah,
This is for every student in the school.
every student in the school has a Chromebook that they get on. And then it basically asks them, how are you doing today? Do you need to see a counselor? And then our counselors follow up. It's not perfect. Some of them have to do paper because the Chromebooks, we have enough for everybody, but not all at the same time. And so it gets moved around a little bit. That's every single day. And what we're seeing now is we're not seeing, at first we'd see the same kids asking all the time. And then we get to them and okay, it's not, is this a small thing, big thing? What is making connection? Mostly they want to be heard. And then that changes. And what we're seeing now is we're not seeing the same students necessarily over and over. We're seeing different students that are finding at this point, I need it. And next week it might be Sarah who needs it. And then next week it was Brian. And then I'm back. So it's being used, I think, judiciously by the students, I think. The other thing is Monday Assembly. I love these things. It's all about being in community and belonging. And, the kids come in, they sit in their first period classes on the gym floor, front to back. There's a kid up, Hannah, holding a sign up there. Miss Drew has music playing on the speakers. We're greeting kids as they come, all the staff's in there, greeting kids as they come in. Some of the kids, there's a cart, looks like a soda cart or something, I don't know. And we have our talking sticks in there. And talking sticks is, I want to recognize Miss Drew because she really helped me out with a problem I had yesterday. Or my buddy, I have to write a little script. They go up there later on in the assembly, they have the microphone in front of 475 kids. And they're saying it's the whole darn thing. We started out, nobody wanted to do it. It's too scary. Now we have 5, 6, 7 on an assembly. We have a weekly dare, and that comes out of Character Strong. Giving credit where it's due, knowing the names of our custodians, holding the door. Teachers see that through the week, and those kids get nominated for a cafeteria lanyard that they get to wear for the week, and it gets to the front of the line. That's high dollars right there, right? We did a National Kindness Day. Our EAs put together. Put this together. And lo and behold, one of them had a connection to the University of Oregon. Somebody went and interviewed him, Justin, I don't know who did it. They made a video, head coach, Bo Nix. What does kindness mean to me? We had the mayor of Cottage Grove, this is in November, mayor of Cottage Grove there, talking about her experience in middle school around bullying. Police chief there talking about that. That changed into kindness by once a month. We have a kid that we recognize gets a kindness citation from the chief of police, and we'll gift card to Dutch Bros. And then we ended up, it's all about the donuts. The class that's been the straightest, been listening the best, and staying, not bumping around each other. They get donuts first period, Monday morning. They go back and they get a donut. And then today we came in and the high school was there presenting about the lion pageant. We use that at the time. It's a community place. It's about belonging, and I say to the kids, one of the most human things is wanting to be heard. So you need to listen and they calm down. And so it's a beautiful thing. So if you want to come see one, come see one. 804. Yeah.
Every Monday.
Yeah, every Monday.
Unless there's no school, then it's Tuesday.
Then it's Tuesday. We don't miss an assembly. We come back on Tuesday, we do it on Tuesday.
So would a board member call the district office to arrange that visit?
What's the protocol there?
Let me know, I'll meet you there.
Okay.
Any Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not today, but any other Monday. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, some of these kids come from such a disruptive home life. And aren't they acting out at school?
Absolutely.
I mean,
if you know any community, especially a small community, you see it even more. There are all walks of life that come through a school's door. And that can be everywhere from an intact family that's had a history of being intact to families that we've experienced some tremendous trauma in our community.
Yeah.
Some tragedies with students, everyone with COVID, just all those things add up. And it's put everybody on edge. And it's not kids are doing things differently than they used to do. It's all about getting attention and belonging with their peers. period. And what's changed is their access to the world has changed tremendously through the darn phone. And all of that information is way too much for that small brain. Middle school is not a developed brain. They don't know what to do with it. But they're gonna do something with it. And typically it turns into leverage to be in a social group or to get somebody out of a social group. So the level of dialogue, the words they use are much more harsh, much more quick to the trigger than they used to be when I started this job 34 years ago. That's what I've noticed. That's what I know. And I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just telling you that's the way it
And
is.
if we bring kids in that are having an issue, you can guarantee that's transferred to some sort of social media, whether it's a group chat or
Yes.
Snapchat. There's something else going on that is more difficult for us to be able to manage and have. So that's almost always a factor.
So, I was a kindergarten teacher, but I did my student teaching in middle school, so I'm a little familiar with the amygdala brain. And they do a lot of negative emotional growth in that brain during those years. So a lot of weird stuff is going on with them, but, the one thing that I would like to maybe suggest, this is awesome stuff. The graphs are great. It sounds like amazing stuff is going on. If I'm the parent of a target child, I would like to have this much stuff on my kid too, happening for my kid. You know what I'm saying?
I think so.
Because if your kid's the target,
Right.
whether you are being a great community or not, you feel like your kid's been cut out of the pack.
I understand.
And if you want this many interventions to help your kid get back in
Right.
and be not a target anymore. So, I mean, and I know that's on your list of a million things to do, but a nice big thick packet of what are we gonna do for that kid too?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And that's a change in thinking. Refocusing. I want to get back to this thing. This thing is student safety plan.
Yeah.
That's what this attempts to do.
Yeah.
That's our step in that direction. Yeah. Because we do focus on the behaviors
Yeah.
first.
Yeah, and it's just, often that kid is a target. I was that kid. Once upon a time in middle school, so that kid's a target because they don't want to be in the group, they don't want to be with the rest of the people, they don't want to. There's probably a reason for that. So how do we get that kid to be more involved in everything?
Right.
I don't know, it's just, again, middle school sucks. I'm sorry, but it sucks to get through it. Nobody wants to go back to middle school. It's like wanting to have a high school reunion, but nobody says, oh, hey, let's get together with all the people in middle school. Nobody does that. So there's a reason.
There is a reason. Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Thanks, Tim.
So PBIS is a relatively new structure for handling behavior things in this district, is it not? In the last few years?
No, we've been like in pieces at the middle school since I started in 2003, 2000.
Under that same framework and moniker?
It has, under PBIS, yes.
It was
Okay.
EBS when it first came
Yeah, it's
out.
EBS, then it was PBS, now it's PBIS, but it's the same structure. But there's been a lot that's added to it over the years, like we didn't necessarily use the pyramid back in the early 2000s. But the premise that you have expected behaviors, you teach those expected behaviors, that's what you expect. And the majority of kiddos will reach that. There's some that are gonna need some extra help, and there's a smaller group that's gonna need a lot of help. That's been around for a while.
Okay. But you said there were pieces of it that you are still learning and training within the school, some of these.
I'm not
Did I
sure.
hear that incorrectly? You talked about one of the tools that was the next level was cessation was one of them.
Oh,
That's not part of.
that's not part of PBIS. That's a response to like a student vaping. And the first part was education. And I know that the American Lung Association has a similar program. As part of ADEP, I believe that's about cessation. And I hopefully we get there.
I just kind of want to make the observation on bullying in general, that this is a very long-term cultural change. You know, that education systems are going through. Like my uncle, who's not that much older than me, showed me his high school yearbook. And in his high school yearbook, first day of the school, bullying the freshmen was like a program. You know, they called it initiation. You know, you've got kids pushing a penny down the sidewalk with their nose and things like that. And that wasn't just accepted, that was school sanctioned. You know, and that seems absurd to us now, not all that many years later. And so I think this is just part of the gradual cultural change towards something more sane, just and wholesome. Yeah. You know, so we're also working against centuries of culture that, you know, there's nothing we can do tomorrow that's going to change everything, but
it's a
something
development
all the time to make gradual progress.
Yes, development, gradual process. To some degree, it's the human condition. I mean, that's, you look at how we behave as humans. And so, you know, that's half the point of school, is learning to be in the same place and get along. And that's, you know, that used to call it citizenship. We don't do that anymore. It's focused on the bullying word. And so we try to change that through belonging, through like student voice, student council. A lot of those kids, the kids you're talking about, that are making a difference, they go over to
nerds.
they go over to Coast Fork. You know, they are getting our bathroom stalls changed. I just had a conversation with Mr. P about that, who heads those kids up. So yes, it's culture, little by little. Those assemblies I compare these better from.
And there are people out there I've heard recently advocating for more bullying in our society. Absolutely, yeah. The notion was that it toughens people up, and so there should be more of that. And so we're having to educate our kids, knowing that that's the message. Some of these kids are coming to school
From the parents?
yeah.
Oh, goodness. I just want to know percentage female versus male. They get in trouble with.
I didn't look at that. I think it's, I don't know. I have to say, I think it's probably more boys than girls. They do things differently. Boys are more physical, girls use words and ostracizing members of the group that they don't want. You can talk to that. You don't.
I do have conversations with girls a lot, and that's like one of the number one tools is to basically exclude. Or exclude and then look like you're talking about somebody, you know, and like that. So deal with that. So oftentimes those don't come up in our like major, hey, this is a physical aggression type of thing.
Very hurtful for the.
So hurtful.
The girl stuff happens after school.
And and social, a lot of the social media.
Has anybody reached out to the staff to find out why, in the staff survey, only 8% of the staff agree or strongly agree that the students are safe from bullying at school? I mean, that bothers me.
Yeah, me too. We processed this all the new truth data with staff, and we came up with a plan, and it's a lot of the things that we want to address going to different communities. That's what we're doing.
I was surprised we didn't get the student survey until today on the safety. I was surprised that it was higher than the family. I expected it to be as worse or worse. Families don't think that their children's environment is safe. 28% responded with agree or strongly agree. It's lower than last year. Lower than the typical urban schools, and the student surveys were rated against other South Lane schools. I don't wanna knock what you guys are doing.
No,
You're
the
obviously
data is
passionate about what you're doing. I don't wanna knock that. I mean, I imagine it would only be worse without this.
Yeah.
Like Tammy said, we've gotta remember the victims.
I actually prefer the word target better than victim.
Targets, yeah, targets.
Victim is a mindset. And target is.
Yeah.
Good point.
There's a lot of improvement to make and,
And that's where we need to go. And so
Yeah.
we heard this and I showed a video to the board. A couple of meetings ago and we showed it to them, a video that I saw and what I saw. Didn't look like bullying and I wanna know about SROs. Are we talking about SROs? Are we having SRO? Are we gonna, we're in budget time? Are we gonna maybe look for some money to help? The city get an SRO? I'm talking like a full-time, not one that hangs out down on Main Street and only comes out when something's needed, but a full-time SRO at Lincoln. You can move them to where the trouble's at, but you should probably be at Lincoln. You know, testimony from the public, testimony from the teachers that were here, testimony from some of the board members. And the data shows that Lincoln's our hotbed.
Yep.
And how long until we see something, I shouldn't have to say it, something worse. I won't say it, something worse. And we're sitting in this room with a packed house trying to talk about, well, it's what's going on all across this country and what you know.
No, I'm not gonna, it may be the case, it is happening in a lot of places, but I'm not gonna say that as a
Some
reason
people
why it's
will.
here, yes.
Some people know.
And I'll tell you, you're preaching to the choir when you're talking to me about SROs. I've worked with some extremely effective SROs in this community, and we meet monthly, the secondary schools with our police department. And it comes up just about every meeting, where are we on that process? And I know they're committed to getting an SRO in place. They have other staffing challenges right now. So I love
Anyway,
it.
we can help.
Hey,
Yeah,
I don't know what that is, but yes.
Well, one thing that we can do is reserve funding for when that happens.
That's what I'm talking about.
You'll see that in the budget that we put out. We have funds available for the SRO position if and when the city is able to fill it.
It takes the right kind of person for that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I don't disagree with that. I don't know what to say, so we're not gonna solve it here today, but we definitely have to keep this conversation going. Said I don't wanna knock what you got, but I wanna look at the data and say that Lincoln is a hotbed, Lincoln's a mess.
That's not fair, though, Glenn. That is not fair.
Look at the
Yes, it is. Look at the data and it's better.
8% of staff believe
So,
that.
That's the belief.
but to make a blanket statement, Dwayne, that the school
That's
is
my
a
opinion.
mess.
My
Okay,
opinion.
but I don't think it's fair.
Is my
There are
opinion.
definitely things that they're focused on,
Right.
as well they should. And when the
Right.
data shows that you should, well, it's not just that, right? When the data shows that there's a discrepancy between where we want to go and where we're at,
Right.
we have some work to do and they're focused on that. Some of these things that they showed you today are in the beginning stages of implementation. They've implemented them within the last year. And that takes a little time to get traction. Is there more they need to do? Yes. I mean, that's why we're taking the steps that we're taking.
Not they, we.
Well,
We're responsible.
well, you're responsible for the policy end of that. They're responsible to do the work. And so that's who's gonna do the work. And we can come and report to you and let you know how it's going. And we'll continue to do that periodically, not every month, not every couple months, but we can do that. Especially when it comes time to the survey time. But this work needs to be done at the school, and that's where they're gonna do it. Because we can't do that work here. It happens with students, with staff, with families at the school.
Part of that work is this conversation. Part of this work is the community seeing that we're having these conversations. Part of the work, and then the communities can share that with the kids or with their grandparents and people see us doing this work.
And for the board to know it's being done,
Absolutely.
because we don't know it's being
Well,
done.
and I think it was a great request to have them come and talk to you about it.
I'm most looking forward to the student parent reviews that we're gonna be doing down through the spring. And I'm sure that those comments, what we do is we collect those comments and and those interviews and the themes within those, and be happy to share those with you as
That
we
would be
discover
great.
them.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
The interviews have made such a difference out of the arena.
Yes.
That has been transformation. That's what I've heard.
I'm not done yet here, so your school district, your school, October of 2022. It said that 50% of the students feel safe from harm in the hallway, bathrooms, and locker rooms. In 2023, 41%. So the statement earlier that it's getting better, the data doesn't show that all across the board, and that's what I'm talking. Is that you go with the data. What we're doing is not working. Even if you say that we're making baby steps, some of the data shows that we're going backwards. And that's a dangerous place. The hallways. I mean, obviously, you guys talked about the administrator being able to get out into the hallway in a timely manner. The teacher to be the teacher, being able to get past it. You know, they got to teach until the bell rings. I'm assuming. Then all the bell rings for all the classes, and he's racing out to get down there, and then you're intervening and trying to say, well, can we find a way to make this work? And can we meet you at the door? We'll fill in for the first 2 minutes till you get here, right? And we got to make it work. If you're not ignoring the fact that you can't have the same person do it every time, you get burned out, so you alternate. So, but yeah, I
Can I address the supervision room just real quick? It's on our leadership team agenda as a single item, agenda item for our next meeting. And there are 2 questions, you know, on there, in addition to some others, but what's the peer accountability with your coworkers, and what's the admin accountability? And to clearly better define what those are. And it is that it's always been, well, if you can't make your duty, make sure your neighbor does it for you. And that may not be as clear as we need to be. So.
That said, if you walk into Lincoln right as the bell rings, which I do every Thursday, there are adults all through the hallways doing their best to keep an eye on the multitude of kids, you know, and I'm seeing them, you know, in every hallway and down the main hallway. I'm not in the whole thing, but a lot of it. Now, kids are clever. There's a lot of them. You're not going to see everything, but there is monitoring throughout the building at the end of the day, presumably every day, every time I'm here.
Well, I'll just add that I think it's a culture thing, and it's going to need a culture change, and I think that we need to hold people accountable, and that the stories I've heard are appalling, and I don't think that the people that are perpetrating these things are being held accountable. That's my personal opinion. I know we can't solve that here, but that's until that changes, we're really limited, like you were saying. I mean, I can kind of make out in this packet what the discipline, what the student safety plan is kind of. That's really recent. What I'm reading here.
Yeah, that's
kind of
like I mentioned this. I think it's the 3rd time we use that format.
Well, I'm just looking at some of the stuff here that the kid shows the student's chosen plan. I can kind of make out what event this was. It's not, yeah, and that's all. And it's sad that they would have to swap their classes. It's safe that they would have to change their life to feel safe and comfortable at school.
Remember, that was a choice. Those were choices.
It's better than not having a choice. Like I said, I guess back to the whole culture thing. Until the civilization is comfortable holding a person of this age fully accountable for what they did, that's kind of really the only option. I mean, you're doing what you can to keep the student safe with what you can do legally. And that's what I'm.
And what do you have them, 6 hours, 7 hours?
8 to 3.
And their parents have them how long?
Outside of 8 to 3.
Yeah.
I'm not putting blame anywhere. Yeah, I mean, it's just it is what it is. It's the culture of our town, the culture of just everything, and it comes through. And our job is to recognize it, to always do better, and try to teaching it. And we do it through our primary means is through education. It doesn't teaching in programs like in depth with vaping. Yeah, do we have to hold kids accountable with consequences? Yeah, but the whole purpose of discipline is to learn. It's not just to slap them on the wrist or whatever it is. You know, back when I got 2 hacks when I was one in 5th grade, one in 6th grade. You know, they don't do it that way anymore. We don't do it that way anymore. So, yeah, we're working on it. We're working on it.
Chairman, I would like to say, I mean, as far, I'm impressed with the presentation. We haven't had a presentation like this ever. And to have a work session that we've never had attendance in. I mean, granted, not a packed house, but to have 5 people in the audience, we've never had that. And so I just want to thank people to be interested to actually come. But like I said, to have 5 people here, thank you. But you guys did an awesome job. So thank you. There's a lot in there that I need to. I don't know, this is what I still can do.
So I had a question about the conversation. They kind of pull up themes that people are concerned about with students and families. I have a feeling that social media is going to be bubbling up. And do you know if there are programs like the baking program that you guys can bring in to augment what you're doing as far as social media bullying? And I think is the vaping program going to continue on? Because I hear just anecdotally that it's an issue at 9 in the district.
Yeah,
and that really concerns me.
Yeah, becoming aware of vaping is very difficult. It's odorless. It's quick. But yeah, the in-depth is going to stick around. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so is that gonna stick around? And then do you think there are, do you know if there are programs like that, like outside or facilitated that we could bring in to work on the social media? Because that's just a whole other piece that is just giant and huge. And I can't imagine you guys trying to come up with something on your own and implement it.
It's a different kind of poison.
Well, we just recently did an advisory lesson on sexting for 8th grade. And what are the implications of that? And in there is a scenario of kind of peer pressure that might occur between 2 individuals. And then what can happen if they cave to that suggestion. That was 2 weeks ago, I think, for advisory. So we do make those are made, we have an advisory team that's in charge of all of the instruction that goes in advisory.
We also had a parent night that was called, I think it was like middle school 101, and there was a large section dedicated to social media.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Sort of thing. You know, what kinds of things kids we're seeing that kids are exposed to and have access to. It's real learning.
Yeah, and you know, we have a policy that says cell phones off when the bell rings, then turn back on at 3 o'clock. And we know kids have them on. You know, I mean, then we're just saying that's not going to become a distraction. And they get messages from home, they get messages throughout the day. And that undercuts our expectation of those being off. I put that in newsletters before, I haven't recently. It just makes it difficult, and it's the culture we live in. It's not just Cottage Grove, it's the cell phone culture. If we could, you know, they have little bags, I don't know what they're called, that you can put a cell phone in that blocks it. There's some schools that do that. Anyway.
And I've heard that those schools have been having success by taking the cell phones out of the mix during the school day. I don't know if that's something that we could be able to consider, and I've brought it up before. I know it's hard, and I know that some teachers use them in schools and for learning in the classroom.
Not so much.
Not even. Okay. That's good.
There are times, like we had a marketing class and he wanted to make videos, so they did that, and then as you know, they don't get posted, it was just for that class. No, this is designed, everything on this thing, you're gonna get me going, any social media, its one task is to get your attention. Because then you look down and you see, oh, there's shoes for sale too. And you look down and go, oh, ooh, that's racy, shouldn't go there. Everything comes through that phone, and it beeps and it tweets, and have you seen The Social Dilemma? Have you watched that movie? Please watch it. It's put out 4 years ago, 3 years ago, and it explains how these algorithms, how Google has your number And literally on everything you do, their algorithms just aren't there. And something happens, it clicks it. It's constantly monitoring every activity that I do on my phone. And her phone and your phone. And then it says,
we're together and know what you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
okay,
They'll get a friend request for you on Facebook
Exactly.
when I get home, Brian.
exactly. I mean, how many times you said, Mark, we were just talking about that. We didn't use our phones.
Yeah, it's marketing, it all appears.
And all, exactly, it's all about advertising dollar, right?
But you know, you turn them off at school, and use them at home, though.
Well, you know what? Give them 7 hours, not phone.
Yeah.
You know, the railroad, we have to turn our phone off, federal law, it has to be off instead, you can't use it, it was a tough one back in 2018, you didn't do it, off instead.
Yeah. So, and we rely on it at work. One of the things that A-Team does is we use Google Chat to communicate, and we have just in time responses. So if a kiddo that might need, to be talked to or go for a walk, A-Team, I'm busy with the kid. I'm busy with the kid. I'm on it. Boom. The dean, Sarah, me, Ara, Brianna, somebody's gonna go.
It's useful, but useful in some cases.
Right. But the social media piece.
How many referrals do you think, like a percentage of referrals, or how many referrals do you think you see phone use related?
Well, here's our phone policy. The first time it's out inappropriately, it gets confiscated, taken to the front office, and the kid can pick it up at the end of the day. The second time, same thing happens, the parent has to come in. The third time, it's in the drawer for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And so they're expected to either turn it in at the beginning of the day and pick it up, which many do. We have 2 drawers now for loans, 2 layers high, and it's the most I've ever seen. And so we're doing a better job with that, or they leave it at home, or they sneak it through the day. I mean, we can't pat them down. So that's how we handle the cell phone.
Does staff think that phones are a contributing factor to the bullying that they?
I haven't asked that specifically, but I would sure think that they probably think it contributes to it.
I'll chime in real quick, because I actually watched an hour-long YouTube video this weekend about some global studies that have been done on where the real impact happens is mental health. And if you look at mental health in teens and adolescents over a long period of time, and with all these things that are happening, like even if you look at COVID, we know that definitely affected kids. The biggest factor that correlates with it is cell phones. And there's all the arguments of, well, it was correlation, not causation. Well, now they have studies that they're doing that actually are proving, and it's a significant impact, and it is affecting girls differently than boys. And when you have students that are dealing with all the complexities of middle school that we just acknowledged, and they have high anxiety, or they have mental health challenges that they're dealing with, then that just adds one more layer to make the decision right, or the decision harder, or the decision different, depending on the context of things. That's the biggest impact.
And the bigger thing too is, Jeremy, with that is these kids don't shut these phones off. I talk to so many of them, and it'll be midnight and they're still looking at their device, whether it's an iPad or their iPhone, whatever.
Adults do.
Oh, yeah. It's like, I just soon throw mine away, but I can't.
The one more thing, I feel like the district historian sometimes, but 15 or so years ago, there was an economic downturn and we were closing schools and cutting programs, and you can't do that and not have an effect 15 years later. I mean, there's a reason why a few of us have been counting the early childhood education drum. Build a foundation, and those kids will have some resiliency to some of this stuff. But we took the foundation away from the kids that are in school, in middle school and high school. We took their foundation away.
And COVID really.
And it didn't help.
Yeah, COVID didn't.
Yeah.
COVID just wasn't, it wasn't just an event. It was a traumatic event.
Yeah.
It was isolation.
Yeah.
And these things became even more prevalent. And not only this, but then we're asking them to do, have school on a computer. Right. It made things, it exacerbated things and made things worse than, and they're still bouncing back from that.
Yeah.
It's a widespread impact on our youth and us.
Yeah.
I want to go back real quick before you guys leave, and you probably won't be here during our budget session, but do we, and I'll find out, I'm sure, do we have enough money, do you think, to fund, at this point, fund a complete SRO officer with no cost to the city? I mean,
We've never done that, and I don't foresee us doing that. That's a shared venture that we usually do. That's what we've always done when we've had it. So
do you think it would make a difference at Lincoln to have a full-time?
Without a doubt,
SRO?
without a doubt. The right person.
The right person, yeah. And that would take.
Corey is an example of the right person. Corey Stevens did a great job.
We had an SRO at our school in high school, and it was, everybody knew him.
Yeah.
You trusted him, you knew him, you looked up to him, and he was the guy you went to talk to when you wanted to be heard. With all these programs you have now, I'm not doing this now, but you know, checking in on the computer, do you need to see a counselor? You went to him.
It's another significant adult, right? And it's a significant adult
Did you
who
look up
is in a uniform that's now not seen in the most positive light in many areas. So we normalize that back,
Right.
you know.
Perfect time to do that.
There you go.
Perfect time when they're developing to normalize the uniform and see that. And I know politics have gotten in the way of that a lot, and I don't know what happened here. I just been funding the city, and so anyways.
it was not a lack of funding.
I don't know what it was. I wasn't here then. If you could tell.
I can tell you just real quick. So it was personnel.
Yeah.
So the SRO resigned. And then since that time, the city has not been able to fill a position here and the other positions that they have. So that's a decision that they have to make.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a lot of support from Cottage Grove Police.
Yeah.
And they've been very responsive whenever we need help. We meet weekly with them, like Bill said. We talk about an SRO all the time.
And they show interest in just finding.
Well, he showed, yeah, I mean, Corey, the chief wants to have an SRO in our schools.
And what are the roadblocks right now with that?
Staffing.
Personnel.
Staffing.
They're not able to hire the officers.
Yeah.
Because
means that there's not somebody there.
I'm just asking a question, because of funding or because people aren't applying or.
It's turnover. I mean, you have to ask him about their staffing, but
Stuff happened down there.
Yeah, that's worth a conversation. I mean, staffing is hard to find. And then the process of becoming a police officer once that hiring takes place,
takes a year.
it's a long time.
If I'm hearing from the people who are telling me without a doubt it would make a difference, and we know we've had it before, I, as a board, I think we should look into and see what kind of carrots we can dangle out there to help. And we've got, I know we don't have unlimited money, but if that's a huge problem at Lincoln, it's huge. It's in the headlines, it's on the news, like it's on social media.
So,
We gotta do
I
something.
think, so I agree. I mean, I've always been in favor of an SRO, but, and I don't want to open up a bigger can of worms here, but I think, that is an idea and I like it. Like, and it's something that we talked about as an administrative team. But I also want to know, I also want to hear from people first, right? I mean, we know what, we know that, I mean, you're not satisfied with the youth truth results, neither are we. And so we want to know more about that. And before we make any decisions on exactly what that might look like, we want to get some street data to know what people say.
That's why I asked about the team staffs at 8%. That's not just low, that's like.
Yeah. It's
I'm like, there's missing a number there.
The one thing that you don't know is that this year we had only half the staff take the survey. So that number, I mean, that skews your results pretty well
It's
too.
better than last year. Last year was 4%. This year they.
No.
That was better.
That was parents.
Yeah.
I thought it was.
No, that was his money dad.
That was that.
Last year?
No,
the number.
22 is 4%.
We're,
And
I think
this year's 8.
they're talking about how many staff actually completed this.
It says agree and strongly agree only.
No, he's talking about the
So the number of staff that took it, we had 50% of our staff take the survey.
Yeah.
Where in years past, we've had nearly 100%. And so that's not a complete picture.
Well, I'm just saying, last year in October of 2020, I guess, October of 2022, it says 4%.
Yeah.
4% agree or strongly agree that students are safe from bullying in high school. This year, 8%, so it's better this year.
I'm not arguing that.
But 8%.
Yeah, it's 8% half the staff, yes. And I don't know what percentage of the whole staff it is. That's part of the data that we need to get.
Right.
Do you follow me?
That's not, when I got the data, I got the data as, that was the percent of respondents that agreed or strongly agreed.
We don't disagree,
Okay.
but you're not hearing one thing that I'm saying. Last year we had 40 some people take the survey.
Okay.
This year we had 20.
6.
26. So
Percentage is a percentage, though, right?
yeah, but it's number of people and the number does skew that. And I don't know which way it would skew it, right?
I don't
And so
know.
that's part of the information that we need to get.
I can't imagine it's skewed by 20% or 30%, but anyway, we're not gonna argue that.
It
The
could.
data's the data and we've
It
got a
could
problem.
go either way.
Right, good. And so the data is the data. We have a problem. We're committed to working on it. We're gonna
Absolutely.
continue, and I think we should probably hear about this. You know, not every meeting, obviously, I mean, you guys are busy, but every 10 months.
Fall or something.
Ten percent's 2.6 though, by the way. So at 26, if 2 people don't like it, that's 8%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think periodically, every other month, I don't think it's a good idea, but
I
we
think
can,
you look at the data. I think
late fall,
people,
we can come back and report
Yeah.
on what we're doing.
90%
Absolutely.
people are.
I mean, Bill, come back and.
Yeah, Bill, come back. please.
Yeah, hear me rambling.
Let's hit up your calendar.
Yeah.
This has really been
I'm getting
very.
tense in there. Yeah, I like talking about it, what we do. We have an amazing staff. And
And some amazing students.
amazing students. And there's a lot of great stuff going on. Social media. There's always a nugget of truth to it. But so often, it skews the data. It skews the story. And that's the power of these one-on-one parent voice, student, and they're not always one-on-one, sometimes you have a couple of them there. Students are more comfortable with another buddy there. Anyway, that's real data. And the process that we learn by which to talk to these kids about these things has shown them to really open up. We couch it in terms of heroes and villains in school. And they're able to talk in those terms. Not all of them, but many of them, most of them. So that's real data. That's your real social media. When things go out on the internet, I don't do social media for the simple reason I can't tell what's fact and what's not. What part of that's true and what part of it's not. And it makes it very difficult to make. It makes it difficult. And I don't do that. And my word of warning is, and y'all know this, but our emotions, when we talk about our kids, are the most important thing. That's why you're sitting up there, because you're kids. And just be careful about pointing fingers right off the bat. You know, we can improve. That's absolutely. The knee-jerk reaction is detrimental. And the language that we choose to use in describing it doesn't move things forward, it divides. And I'm talking in general terms. I've seen it, I've heard it. I wonder if I would be saying this if I weren't retiring in 2 minutes. But what the heck? It's how I feel, it's what I believe.
Yeah, 2 months.
He's had 2 years.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for shocking me back on reality. No. So I know the hearts of every staff member at Lincoln is into what we're about. And I know we're coming together more and more as a staff. And I know that we're moving in the right direction. And 8% sucks. Okay, but that's something that we're going to continue to work on.
Bill, a week ago, we didn't have this packet in front of us. We didn't know what we were doing.
I know, and that's my fault. That's why I said at the beginning, I have this, I tend to be protectionist.
I'm not saying it's your fault.
No, I'm telling you what I feel about it. That's okay, Sherry. I mean, I'm fine with that. I have a protectionist personality. I want to insulate our teachers from having to deal with all that noise out there. I want to insulate our kids from that. I want to make sure, and I think that's to a fault in cases. I really do. And so I own that. I'll own it forever. Try to get better at it. Oh. Yeah.
Thank you for everything you're putting into it, and staff. And thank you, Brian, for putting this together. It's been very good.
I worked with them. They did the hard work. So welcome. I want to make sure I recognize them. They're looking at what needs to change, and they're changing. So.
And if you have any great feedback or suggestions, we're looking to partner, so let us know. I mean, great feedback from you, so we appreciate it.
You guys are doing great. This is amazing stuff.
It doesn't happen overnight.
No.
And it takes a while for everyone to learn and implement consistently. And so that you guys are staying the course is huge, and keeping it simple and so that people can manage what they're doing as staff to support kids. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It just takes special individuals to be in middle school, I think.
Special? Okay.
I mean, you really have to have a heart and care for the kids. Cause they could break your heart too.
When I think back about my school experiences, high school was great, I mean, but I have my most fun memories of just like being alive, just like out there in 7th and 8th grade, with junior high.
Yeah.
It was just so much fun, just being nuts, right?
Yeah.
They were just going crazy. They got serious in high
Life is
school.
different now, though.
Oh, yeah.
They're not out there riding their bicycle or talking through the woods. Well, thank you.
All right, well, yes.
Thank you.
Bill and Sarah and Brian. And with that, we are adjourned. Sorry. Oh, you're good.